Hello and welcome to Fiction Fans, a podcast where we read books and other words too. I'm Lily.
And I'm Sarah, and I'm so delighted to welcome Stark Holborn onto the podcast today to talk about For the Road.
Oh, hi both. Yeah, thanks for having me back.
Well, before we jump in to discuss your novella that came out, I believe, last August, we have a couple of quick intro questions, starting with what's something great that happened recently?
Well, I mean, it's pretty tricky at the moment with the state the world's in. But the other day, I asked people on Blue Sky just to send me kind of interesting, weird, quirky, homemade, handmade things, just because I was so sick of the sort of generative AI chat and that everything has to be productive and everything has to be perfect. And as a result, people sent me the most amazing stuff. They sent me pictures of their crocheted ugly fish hats, like games I'd never heard of, like brilliant sort of glitchy zines, and just so it was so nice just to see all of these very painstakingly, lovingly created projects that people have. Not because they're doing it for money, not because they're doing it to be productive, but just for the love of creation. And I think that's so important to remember at the moment. So yeah, if you're interested in any of those, go on my Blue Sky and you'll find a big list of weird stuff to check out.
That's wonderful. And why we asked the question, I think we started the podcast in the pandemic. So we were like, something good has happened.
Yeah, something good must have happened. Yeah.
Sarah, how about you? How's your week been?
So my good thing is not quite as wholesome as Stark's, but I finished the garage cleanout project that I started in December. My garage was just completely full of crap and unorganized and not very usable, and it is now beautifully empty and has lovely shelving, and I'm very pleased with it. It's not like, I mean, my garage still has holes in the walls, like it's not a great structure, but the inside is at least tidy.
That's a great
tidy,
thing. Very productive.
Ready to be filled up again.
Exactly.
I did a big hair chop this week. I got absolutely fed up, and the idea of dealing with it another day was just exhausting. So I cut off like 4 or 5 inches. My hair is still quite long, so it doesn't make a big difference, but it feels much better. And what is everyone drinking today?
I'm drinking some wine that one of my neighbours left around my house. But, you snooze, you lose. So it's mine now. And it's mostly because I'm feeling a little bit delicate today, because last night, another good thing was I went to a sort of queer MTV music night, which was fantastic. But yes, so I'm going to need a little bit more fuel today.
Wine that someone left at your house is the best kind, in my opinion.
I agree. I think that this novella calls for either whiskey or black coffee, and it's a little early for drinking whiskey, and I don't like coffee, so I'm actually drinking tea instead.
It's fine. Just pretend it's coffee out of like a tin mug or something, and
yes.
No one has to know.
I am drinking coffee, but I don't live in the Dust Bowl, and it's Saturday, so it is a very indulgent oat milk caramel sauce, absolute nonsense creation. But it is coffee, so I'm counting it.
No, it has to be, black coffee, really gritty, kind of probably
with
burns
sand.
your throat.
Yeah,
with sand, extra sand.
Well, this is actually a book podcast. I have just been reading podcast books lately, so I have no answer for this question. But has anyone read anything good lately?
The podcast books that I've been reading have been good, but they don't count for the purpose of this question. They're not extracurricular, so I also don't have an answer.
Well, I do actually. A couple of weeks ago, I finished drafting a manuscript for a new book, which I can't really talk about at the moment. But when I'm drafting, I kind of struggle to read fiction quite a lot. So I tend to sort of read nonfiction and read around the subject. Anyway, so I finished. It means I'm diving back into novels again. I just read a really good one called Bog Queen by Anna North. She wrote Outlawed, which came out a few years ago, which is a Western. This one isn't a Western. It's about a body that's found in a bog, and then it goes back and tells the story of the life of the person who actually was in the bog in sort of very early Roman times in Britain. And yeah, I really enjoyed it. Great book. Not a great title. Great book.
That sounds awesome. I'll add it to the TBR, the ever-growing to-be-read list.
The endless TBR.
Well, we did read For the Road by Stark Holborn, which I believe you're very familiar with.
I mean, that's convenient because...
Yes. So The promotional materials refers to this book as an acid western, and I had not heard of that subgenre before. What makes it acid, if I may
I
ask?
think it's mostly used in reference to cinema and
Mm.
film. So you had the revisionist westerns of the sort of 60s, early 60s, people like Monty Hellman kind of turning all of the established stereotypes on their head and kind of relooking at what the Western tropes should be. But then acid westerns are sort of a subgenre of revisionist westerns. So I guess because they were being made during the 70s, a lot of them kind of the era of, acid and LSD and trips and stuff. They're quite existential, quite surreal, a lot of them. So sort of existential, surreal westerns could be classed as acid westerns.
Interesting.
Awesome.
So the other books of yours that we've read, the Factus trilogy, also had some aspect of a Western to them, like For the Road does. What about that genre in particular draws you to it?
I'm completely fascinated by westerns, and everyone I think assumes I grew up watching them and reading them, and I didn't. If you told me when I was younger that I'd be writing westerns, I would have said that's a completely mad thing to say. But I think I'm drawn to them because I find the genre it's a very problematic genre. It's a new genre, and it was kind of created as the history was happening. And on the surface, I think a lot of people say, "Oh, I don't like westerns because they're, you know, you assume they're the sort of John Wayne vehicle ones, like macho white guy kind of establishing sort of manifest destiny and all of that nonsense." But yeah, I think once I started looking into the genre, I kind of wanted to tackle it and wrangle with it because I find it problematic. So I wanted to kind of dig into some of the stereotypes and see what I could do to shake it up and to reinvent the genre a bit, because that's what we can do as writers, and that's what I hope all writers are doing, is kind of putting their own spin on things and taking a genre apart and poking about in it and then putting it back together again in a different way.
Well, I definitely have loved everything of yours that I've read. I haven't read all of your body of work, not yet, but yeah, and it's really fascinating to see the different aspects of the Western that you have brought to the different series, because For the Road is a very different in feeling from, the Factus trilogy.
It is, yes.
Unlike Tenlo, this story takes place in the real world, the Dust Bowl era United States. How is writing a story in a historical setting different from one that you've invented yourself?
I mean, I started off writing historical fiction. So Nunslinger, my debut book, is historical fiction. It gets shelved in sort of speculative fiction. I'm not sure why. Probably because, Westerns, especially in the UK, it's like no one knows where to put them. It gets put in crime sometimes. It gets put all over the place. But so, yeah, I started off writing historical fiction. I'm quite comfortable in that genre. I love the research part of it. I love trying to bring it's a bit like with world building in science fiction, right? You're trying to bring an era to life, and the way to do that is to get sort of the right details, not tons and tons of detail, but just the right historical details to make it feel real and lived in.
And especially in a novella, you have very limited space to do that in.
Yes, I know. Well, this is the thing. I like novellas, and I'm sort of trained in them because Nunslinger is actually, even though it's a big chunky 180,000 word book, it's actually 12 novellas stuck together. So I was basically writing those as they were being published, because we did it in a sort of, penny western styles. Every 3 months, another three would come out. So I was writing and editing these novellas every 3 months, and it was a kind of whirlwind. Like, it was a training ground for writing, really. And you don't have a lot of space in novellas to tell the story. So yeah, you do have to be very selective about pace and about characters and what you have the space to show.
You mentioned in the acknowledgments of For the Road that you first had the idea for this story while listening to music. Is that part of your typical process?
No, not at all. No. I mean, I don't know. A lot of ideas, you probably hear this a lot, but, often you'll be reading something or seeing something and suddenly something will jump out and be like, oh, there's a story there. The only time this has happened, I was listening to Bob Dylan's One More Cup of Coffee for the Road, and the lyrics are so fantastic. And they just kind of, I found myself imagining what world this would, who these characters were that he was singing about. And yeah, so it kind of all grew out from there, really. Not my typical thing at all, but this is quite an atypical novella for me in quite a lot of ways, which we'll probably get into.
I swear about half of my annotations in this book were just highlighting sections with a bunch of exclamation points, because in many moments there is a very mundane or straightforward image or thing that's happening, but the prose is telling me that I should be freaked the fuck out. And so, can you tell us about creating that foreboding atmosphere with very typical events? The one that I pulled out as an example is Rosmerta replaces the bottle with an identical one. Right? Replacing a bottle on a shelf is not a strange thing to do, but when it happens in this book, and I won't talk too much about what's happening in that moment, as a reader, I was like, something is going on. And you clued us in just so elegantly.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I mean, I really wanted to create that atmosphere where everything seemed kind of normal, but was just off, kind of a bit wrong. And one of the people, I mean, I'm a big fan of Philip K. Dick. I've read a lot of his books, and he does that extremely well in a lot of his books, especially in Ubik. Kind of everything just starts to seem not right, and I think that's actually more unsettling sometimes than, you know, some big terrifying thing, because it's what we expect to be familiar, and suddenly it isn't. You think, well, if that's not familiar, then what the hell else is going on? Like if even a bottle seems strange, like there's nothing to hold on to, then the whole, you know, fabric of reality could be disintegrating around you, and there's nothing you can do about it.
Yeah, we kept getting little clues, and it was just, oh, chef's kiss.
Thank you. Yeah, it was quite fun to write. I won't sort of do a spoiler, but I will just say the egg is something that readers have sent me messages about and said I put them off eggs for a while, so sorry about that.
Well, okay, no, we can't. Spoiler section. So before we get into that conversation, I actually have a question for Sarah. Sarah, who should read this book?
You should read this book if you enjoy Westerns and want an atmospheric book that makes mundane imagery feel eerie.
This episode of Fiction Fans is brought to you by Solsticia.
That's our zine. Each issue has a different theme that celebrates genre and genre blending in a new way.
PDF and EPUB versions can be purchased on our website, and Patreon supporters of all levels get free digital copies.
You can find all the issues and more at patreon.com/fictionfanspod. Thank you for your support.
The remainder of this episode contains spoilers.
The egg moment, I feel, was the first concrete thing where we're being let in on, like, okay, yes, something is happening here. It's not just Jesse, our main character, feeling out of sorts. And I don't remember exactly when in the book that happens, but it was a sort of just this nice, like, okay, we're officially, here there be monsters kind of thing.
Yeah, I think it's about halfway. Maybe it falls kind of roughly halfway. I think it's his second morning there, or third morning or something. I mean, time is quite strange in Dawn's Holt as well. But yeah, the egg moment, I really wanted that to be kind of quite grotesque and horrifying. And the reason it's eggs is because, you know, Dawn's Holt is a place it's stuck. There can be no renewal, and an egg is such a symbol of new life and kind of new beginnings and birth. So I wanted it to be, it can't exist there. So that's kind of why I chose that to be. And that's when there's something quite horrifying. I think it's the horror of again, something being expected and then being faced with something so awful instead.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry. And we are given warnings. I mean, like the characters Rosmerta and Navia say, like, the eggs are bad, but I think that for me as a reader, like, I didn't expect it to be that bad or bad in that way. So it was that additional layer of shock, like, oh, when they said bad, yeah.
There's something really grotesque about a bad egg, and I'm trying to work out why I think maybe it's because it does have the potential to just be so horrible. And I suppose it's the unseen and the unknown as well. But yeah, I suppose that's kind of one of the horror-ish elements that have come into this book. And some people have said this is kind of like almost like a folk horror, which is, you know, probably accurate as well.
I can see that. There's definitely, like, the folklore is strong. I guess, well, I won't argue with you that it's not horror, but...
horror elements, maybe.
Yeah. It's something about eggs, because they look normal from the outside, right? But you don't know what's happening inside. There's a lot going on.
Mm-hmm.
This book maintains a sense of mystery despite being from the first person perspective. Can you tell us a little bit about controlling that flow of information without cheapening Jesse's inner thoughts?
I tried to write this one third person and it just didn't work. I just found I'd slipped back into first person without even meaning to. And one day I'll write something in third person. I will. I'm determined to. But at the moment, I'm still sort of, it's kind of my go-to thing to have first person POV. It was tricky because, again, we only sort of see what Jesse sees. And so I think the trickiest thing was wrangling with him not freaking out all the time, you know, because technically he should be freaking out all the time. But so I wanted it to be just normal enough to kind of keep him there, and then have that sense of being a bit spellbound and a bit enchanted and a bit sort of befuddled by the whole thing. So he isn't thinking clearly. That was, I think, maybe how I approached kind of the flow of information there. Just the idea that the place itself is having an effect on him. And so he isn't kind of acting logically or thinking clearly.
It's fascinating to think of this book as originally having been envisaged in the third person, because I don't know if you would get that same sense of unsettledness. Like I feel like you really need Jesse's perspective to convey that very like dreamy, atmospheric, folklore-esque perspective.
Yeah, because it's not it wouldn't have the same effect of the kind of the eeriness and the not knowing. I think the not knowing is a big part of this book.
Yeah, absolutely.
In a book with such limited characters, limited in the sense that it's a novella, right? We don't have a cast of 100. We still get several brother relationships, which I thought was very interesting. We have, of course, our main character, Jesse, and his brother, who we don't meet on the page, whose name I didn't write down. Andros?
Andros, yeah.
Andros, okay. And then we also have the father of the homestead where he's staying in this sort of liminal space, crossroads location. And then we eventually find out his brother is, I'm going to call the antagonist in a sense. Heck. And so it feels like there's something there, but I am not quite able to articulate it because I did read this yesterday and haven't had enough time to sit and think about it to figure it out. But brothers, there's so many brothers.
Yeah, that's true. I think it's power dynamics and kind of close relationships that are kind of accepting while still, you know, it's accepting that everyone is kind of a bit monstrous in their ways. And even if it's a close relationship like you would have with a brother or a sibling, yeah, it's about sort of knowing, seeing that in someone else, seeing the monstrous and accepting it as well. That's definitely the case for Lugus or Lug and Heck. Yes, who are based on Gaulish mythology. This is a very weird combination of things, this book. It's kind of got, you know, Bob Dylan, Dust Bowl, and then Gaulish mythology kind of all rolled up together. So yeah, Lugus is based on Gaulish deity, and so is Heck. So they are sort of two sides of a coin, really.
Actually, that perfectly answers the next question that I was going to ask, because this is a very folkloric book, as we've talked about. And there were some references that we caught, like the coins to pay the ferryman, you know, Greek mythology. But it felt like there was something else that I couldn't place. And yeah, Gaulish mythology would be it.
Yes, Gaulish mythology is deeply weird. It's a religion of animism, so the land itself has power. So I thought that fit really well with this setting, which is sort of out of time and out of place. But then, yeah, Lugus, I mean, in mythology, he's a psychopomp. He ferries souls, a bit like Charon. There are lots of them in mythology. So I wanted to kind of reimagine that liminal setting of sort of a purgatory space. And it's almost, I'm spoilerific, going big on the spoilers now.
Yes.
But it's almost a space that it looks that way because Jesse has imagined it. He's almost created it by his, you know, the world he knows and the references he knows. So that's why it looks the way it does, but also is quite strange as well. They exist, I think, you know, Lugus and Rosemerta and Heck, they almost exist as the intangible concepts, and he's brought them into being shaped that way.
So is the language that we see Rosemerta and Lugus speak a couple of times in the book, is that based on an existing language?
Oh God, if there's any like scholars of like Gaulish out there. I probably mangled it horribly, but it is my attempt at Gaulish, which doesn't really exist as a written language. There's very few sources, so I had to be a bit spicy with how I did it. It's probably horribly wrong, but I more wanted to use it because I wanted the reader to be kind of taken aback and not know what language it was either. Jessie doesn't know, so I wanted it to be unfamiliar.
And it was very unfamiliar. It was very cool running across it and not even I wasn't even able to recognize the root words or like have an idea of what family of language it was from, which is why at first I thought maybe this is fully invented. But reading along, realizing how much mythology was clearly at the core of this story, I was like, no, this is a real thing. I just don't know it, which does happen sometimes.
So what was your research process like for this book? Because like you say, it is deeply based on real sources.
Yeah, I mean, I wanted it to have that kind of quite, elemental, earthy kind of quality to it, just because, again, in the song, to me, that's what the song has to it. It has these sort of archetypal characters almost. So I suppose that's why I gravitated towards Gaulish mythology. I mean, I'd been reading about it anyway, I think. I wanted the figure of a psychopomp, I wanted the figure of like a fairy person. So I started reading around and landed on Lugus and thought, well, okay, yeah, that really works for this. So a lot of reading around the subject. I mean, the most in-depth bit of research I did, at one point Lugus plays like a lap harp, which has sort of strings on it, and it's based on a Finnish cantilè. It's a 5-string lap harp, and it had exactly the right tone that I was looking for. And I got so obsessed with them, I ended up ordering one. And so I'm learning how to play it. So that was my most useless bit of in-depth research, was learning how to play a Finnish cantilè. And it's a beautiful instrument, very simple, basically a piece of wood with 5 strings. And I've got it tuned to D minor. So all I can really play is just very melancholy polkas. That's fine. I just sometimes sit and play a melancholy polka.
Okay.
That's awesome, though.
I have to say, I assume someone offhandedly saying, oh yeah, I picked up a whole new instrument for this book. That must mean you play instruments already. That can't have been the first instrument you've picked up.
No, I do. I play a few things, but very badly. I don't play well, but it is only 5 strings. It's not hard to learn. So it was definitely not a particularly challenging one. And, it was a lot of fun because that's a legitimate business expense.
Yeah, there you go. During the process of writing this story, were there any scenes or moments that surprised you?
I mean, there sort of were. I think I was surprised by the ending because I had no idea really where this was going at all. I wrote this in a very different writing approach, a very different way than I'd normally write anything. I wrote it in what can only be described as sort of vibe chunks, like chunks of just vibes. And then I had to sort of string it together into something that made sense. So there was a lot of vibe, and then I had to sort of fill in the connective tissue afterwards. So I really had no idea how this was going to play out until I got there. Oh, yes. One of the bits that surprised me, and I've no idea where it came from, is like Lugus squeezing Jessie's heart in his hand until it turns to light. And that, becomes a knife and things. A very weird imagery like that. I think I was on a bit of a writing sprint that day, and I was just deep in it, and that came from sort of nowhere. So I suppose, yeah, it was the not knowing. Normally I have a slightly better idea of where I'm going with the book, but not with this one.
Do you typically outline your work quite a bit?
Not really. I have a vague system, which is I kind of usually write a sentence or two about the main kind of theme. I think of my chapters as scenes rather than chapters. They're often, because I'm writing in first person, they're often quite concise. I like to be able to envisage the whole scene and for the scene to have a point to it. So I'll write a couple of sentences of what the scene is about, and then I'll usually give it a star system. I have a star system. So red is action, yellow is character, green is description. And so when it's on the page, I can then see if I've got too much red or too much yellow or not enough green. And I started doing that when I was writing Nunslinger because they were very short chapters and very short novellas, and I had to try and maintain a kind of level of dynamic range in them, so it wasn't kind of action all the time. So that's kind of what I do, really. I don't like outlining too heavily because for me it just sucks all of the joy out of it, and I get some of my best ideas when I'm mid-flow.
So you mentioned earlier that point of view changed. How different otherwise is the final product from the first draft?
Not that different, actually, because like I say, I kind of wrote it in chunks, and that's normally when I'm writing, I know the good bits, right? There's this whole kill your darlings thing, and yeah, sometimes you've got to do that, whatever. But I think I usually know the bits which I think are kind of the decent bits. And I think I was writing this at quite a hectic time, so I really only was writing like the vibey bits. I think for the final draft, a couple of things changed, and I had to make it a bit longer. It actually came in at 18,000, so I had to bulk it out a little bit. But that was fine because once I went back to it, I could see the places that could do with a bit more flesh on them. So that's really the only thing that changed.
It does not feel like you went back and added fluff. I'll say that.
Yeah, no,
yeah.
It's possibly a little bit too bare bones before.
Yeah. Is there anything that you would like readers to take away from this book?
I think if you've never read a Western, then it's probably quite a good introduction to the genre. Hopefully, it might get people interested in other Westerns like it, which especially exist in film. And then I think the fact it's kind of a queer romance as well, for me, was like quite an important part of this. It's kind of combining things that I feel passionately about, and we don't get many queer Westerns, so I would like people to enjoy it for that reason and maybe seek out some others.
Yeah, we haven't actually talked much about Rio and Jesse's romance, but it was such a beautiful, like, understated relationship, I thought. I really, and I typically am not a huge romance person for my books, but I thought it fit in perfectly, and yeah, I really enjoyed it.
Thanks. Yeah, I think it's an important part of the book because it's Jesse allowing himself to be seen and kind of finally, kind of doing something for somebody else as well, not just himself.
Yeah, I think we get to explore a lot of his character growth through the relationship that he has with Rio. So you give a list in the acknowledgments of some of the songs that you listen to that informed this book. Are there any other recommendations that you have for people who do you have a playlist that people should listen to while they read this?
Oh, yes, I do have a playlist. Yes. I mean, I had a Spotify playlist, but I'm coming off Spotify, so hopefully I'll be able to share it on Tidal instead. But I mean, in the back of the book, there's a list of artists and musicians who've inspired the writing of it. And I say in the acknowledgement, it's a book born from songs, and it really is. It's kind of, I think I was trying to take that feeling you get when you listen to a song that just completely captures you. And it's almost like it creates a world in miniature for that, 2 minutes and 30 seconds or 3 minutes or however long the song is. And that's the kind of vibe I wanted the book to have. Really transportative, even though it doesn't last for very long. So yeah, to me, I listed some of the artists I really like. Bands like Can. We were talking about acid westerns earlier, and there's a fantastic acid western that nobody's seen called Deadlock, directed by Roland Click in the 70s, and it has a soundtrack by Can, who are a fantastic sort of psychedelic rock band. And so a few of their songs very much informed this book. And, some folk musicians as well. Anais Mitchell and Hadestown was a big influence on this too. I'm a huge fan. But yeah, everything from sort of psychedelic rock to folk is in there. And yeah, in the acknowledgements, there's the list, so you can go and check some of them out.
Speaking of media recommendations, is there a queer Western off the top of your head that everyone ought to try out?
Upright Women Wanted by Sarah Gailey. Librarians, queer romance, queer love. And it's kind of a satire as well. So yeah, and it's also a novella. So
I think I have that one on my shelf, actually. I've not read it, but I really liked Gailey's American Hippo, which I guess also would fit in the queer Western.
It's technically not in the West, but...
Yeah, but it's the same vibe.
Yeah. We're vibes-based, it's fine.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. It has been wonderful diving into this book a little bit deeper. You mentioned that you just wrapped up a project that you can't talk about. Is there anything that you have coming up that you would like to talk about? or can?
No,
are allowed to?
at the moment, I'm not really allowed to talk about anything. Hopefully I'll be able to talk about the new book soon. But apart from that, I work in video games, and which are notorious for NDAs. I will say that I am working on a game at the moment, and it's one that me and some co-writers who I met in a writer's room are making together. So it's the first time we've actually made our own game, our own project, not somebody else's, and that's very exciting.
That's awesome. Really cool. So this is a little off topic. How would you say that writing for video games differs from like writing a book?
I mean, it's completely different kind of style, really, because, you don't have a lot of room in games. Maybe with a very narrative text heavy game, you could get away with a bit more, but typically you only have a sentence or two, or maybe a paragraph on the screen to hook readers and to hook players. A lot of people will just skip past text otherwise. So you have to learn to be I read everything.
Illegal.
Yeah. I know. But people do. Some people, I don't know who they, but anyway. But so you have to be concise, you have to be really pithy. You have to also understand that the writing sometimes isn't there to be the front and center. It's just kind of help steer the narrative or steer the player or support the gameplay. So it's just one aspect really of a much wider project. I mean, I think it has impacted my writing a bit. So Ninth Life, I mean, because it's told, this is the third book in the 10 Loathed Factor series. It's kind of told in lots of different forms and styles of writing, so we've got a bit of an unmade screenplay in there, and, a radio DJ and adverts and things. And that's, I think, something that I brought from games, because that's a lot of the work I did on Shadows of Doubt, which is the detective game I wrote, was about world building texts and kind of trying to convey the narrative through those rather than in a sort of linear format.
I would play the hell out of a Tenlo video game. Sorry, and now that's where my brain is, and it won't go anywhere else.
I would love that. If anyone wants to make one, great. Don't make me
programmers,
do it.
jump on in.
So, you can't talk about your current projects, but where can you be found on the internet so that people can follow you and eventually hear about projects when you're allowed to talk about them?
Well, I'm Stark Holborn on everything really. So I'm Stark Holborn. I'm on Instagram and Blue Sky. Like I said, if you're on Blue Sky and want to find that list of cool stuff that people were recommending me, that's one of the places where I sort of hang around. And I've got a Patreon as well, which if you're interested in what I'm doing, that's where I post up kind of, I hate posting unfinished work. I hate it, but I do, because as a thank you to the people who support me on there, they get to see things first, things from behind the scenes that I haven't showed anyone, kind of photos and things like that. I also post up every month, I'll post up a list of film recommendations, things that are on streaming platforms that you might not otherwise find, because I hate trawling through trying to find things. So it's my kind of monthly recommendation list of cool things.
That's awesome. Why is it so different? I remember when you would go to a video rental store and browsing through videos or movies, that was fine. But now that it's scrolling through a screen, for some reason, it is torture.
Yeah, I think it's because there's just too much. And so you're faced with this sort of, you just can't pick anything. And it's not tangible. You can't pick it up and read it and put it back and pick it up. And so I don't know. I love video stores. We've got an amazing one here in Bristol where I live called 20th Century Flicks, which is actually a video store. You can go in and rent DVDs. It's great. But mostly you just go in for a chat and you come out with 3 DVDs you never heard of before, and they're brilliant. So that's kind of what I try to do with my recommendation list as well. Just things you might not have heard of, might not otherwise find. I try and take some of the pain of scrolling out for people.
Well, I am excited to go find that, which is what I am going to do immediately after we're done here. Thank you so much for joining us, and can't wait to read whatever mysterious project you have coming up next.
Thank you. Yeah, it's so nice to be back and to talk about the book again. And this is quite close to my heart, this one. So yeah, I really appreciate it.
Well, I absolutely loved it. And yeah, thank you so much for chatting with us.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Fiction Fans.
Come disagree with us. We're on Blue Sky and Instagram at FictionFansPod. You can also email us at fictionfanspod@gmail.com or leave a comment on YouTube.
If you enjoyed the episode, please rate and review on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, and follow us wherever your podcasts live.
We also have a Patreon where you can support us and find exclusive episodes and a lot of other nonsense.
Thanks again for listening, and may your villains always be defeated. Bye!
Bye.